Hi there folks, and welcome to this video about narrative structure, which is question 3, paper 1 of the AQA English Language qualification for GCSE. And AQA, as far as I am aware, is the only exam board that assesses narrative structure as a completely separate question. So out of the main 4 exam boards, AQA is the only one that does it separately to language, whereas the other 3 exam boards will ask students to write about structure as well as language, potentially in the same question. Now, you have been taught, I'm sure, ways to approach that, but just bear in mind that this presentation is primarily for the AQA specification, where structure is a separate question. The aims of this tutorial are these. First, to actually work out what narrative structure means, because if you think about it, it's quite a strange term when we're talking about writing. So how can writing have a structure? To also show you what the question will be like in that exam, because the question is always the same for question 3. So we know what's going to come up already, as well as the bullet points underneath are the same as well. And importantly, perhaps at the end of this presentation, the final slide is some or most of the structural concepts that you can use in your response and things to look out for, which you can apply to every text, really, whatever the extract is. So those are the aims of this session. So if we think about its structure, before I even start looking at texts with students, I will spend part of the first lesson on structure on talking about what do we mean by structure. When something has a structure, what does it mean? What things have structures? So before we even start looking at texts, we can talk about the structure, for example, of DNA, or the structure of atoms in chemistry, or the neurons and the other things as well, protons I think they're called. So, in science we have structures, the structures of our DNA, and what that means is, different bits have come together to construct something. We can talk about the structure of a jigsaw puzzle. All those pieces fit together to create an overall image. And you only get that overall image once those jigsaw pieces have been fitted together in a specific way. We think about, building a wall out of Lego bricks, for example, that each of those bricks will fall into place to build the structure of the wall. So those bricks all work together to construct that wall in that way. And we also talk about architecture, so the structure of buildings, for example. We only have a set amount of materials in the world, such as wood, plastic, metal, and so on. But we have an unlimited number of ways that we can make buildings look, because we're using those materials differently. So we can see there the Eiffel Tower being constructed over a period of time to get to the final piece, what we see now. So structure, therefore, is all about constructions. It's all about building things, and it's all about materials coming together to create an overall picture, or to create an overall structure, or an overall thing. So it's about separate components that are constructed together to create something that all those components work together to make. So if we think about then turning our attention to writing, because obviously English is interested primarily in writing and reading and texts. If we think about it, you have letters, and those letters come together to make words, and those words come together to make sentences. When you put those sentences together, you get paragraphs, and then when you put all those paragraphs together, you come out with the whole text, or the extract that you have in the exam. So that extract is made up of lots of different components, as you can see there. And it's all those things, how they fit together, which will create the structure of your text. So you can see when I often find myself teaching structure, I use a lot of flowcharts. I use lots of arrows because it's all about this idea of a sequence or an order moving from one place to another. Another way to look at it is like this, and this, I suppose, is slightly simpler. So narrative, we mean obviously story. So what is the structure of that story? What is the structure of the extract that you have been given in that exam? So if you think of each of those rectangles there in that flowchart being a paragraph, you have the opening paragraph, then you progress into paragraph 2, then you progress into paragraph 3, then you shift to paragraph 4, and then you finally shift to the end paragraph. And those paragraphs fit together in that way to create the structure of your extract. This is the only question, remember, where you will be required to read the whole of the extract, because it's important that you appreciate the shape or the construction of the text in its completed form. And in order to do that, you need to know the opening, the middle bit, as well as how it ends. One of the bullet points under the question will use the word develops. What that means is as you read. So as you read a text in chronological order from beginning to end or from top to bottom, the text is developing before your eyes. So whenever you read something, the text is developing, okay, because you're gradually being almost drip fed the information with each sentence that you read. And those sentences, obviously, as I've said, form paragraphs. You can see we've got more arrows, we've got more of a sequence again. Another way you can look at it is by doing storyboards and being a bit more creative and doing some drawing. So sometimes what I will do is I will ask students to draw the extract in a series of boxes. And this is very good for visual learners who might like films, for example, or media studies. If you think about the fact that we have maybe some kind of sci-fi extract which has a flying saucer and aliens in it, this is along the lines of what a student could draw. So the first paragraph is describing the spaceship. The second paragraph is about zooming into the alien boarding the spaceship, and we're wondering where that spaceship is going. Then the spaceship takes off and goes towards a distant planet. And then as we come towards the end of the extract, the flying saucer flies over some city, and then a member of the public spots the flying saucer and perhaps is, I don't know, abducted, let's say. So boxes here are really important. I could draw arrows between these boxes as well to show a particular flow, like a comic strip, for example. But with each box and with each drawing, you can see here, the focus is shifting. And the idea of focus shifting is another important aspect of the structure question, because with each paragraph you read, the focus will shift. In other words, what you see will shift because the examiner is navigating you through different topics of each paragraph. So think about drawing out the paragraph. If the drawings are different in each paragraph, it means that the writer is showing you different things, and therefore the focus is shifting. And in order to have a shifting focus, that obviously means you're moving through the text in some kind of sequence. So sometimes I will say to students, imagine that this is a camera. Imagine that you are a camera. What is the camera showing you? What is it directing you towards? And again, it's still about sequence, it's still about order, but it's also about focus shifting. So turning our attention then to the question, as I said at the beginning, the question will always be worded the same. So we're in a fortunate position for this question because we always know what the question will be. How does the writer structure the text to interest you as a reader? Now, for some students, that's a tricky concept because, to be interested in a text means that you must like reading, and you must like writing, and you must like analysing. But that's not the case for every student. Some students don't like English. Some students don't read a lot. So the idea of being interested by a book to some students is completely alien, because how on earth can I be interested by a text if I don't like reading? So sometimes what I will say to students is, okay, get rid of that word interest and reword the question into this one. Why has the writer told you the story in this order? Okay, that's asking you exactly the same. Okay, the why is the analysis. Okay, why has the writer told you about this at the beginning? Why does this then happen in the middle? And what is the effect of the end of the text, being the end? What is the resolution? Okay, and why is it that we are told this at the end, for example? Another question you can ask yourself is, what are the effects of telling the story in this sequence? So like I said, why has, in a murder mystery, for example, the writer told you about a knife with blood on it in the first sentence? And why might the writer keep going back to that knife as well? So sequence and order are really underpinning this question. Okay, so if you find the question wording a bit strange, then think about asking yourself those different questions underneath that are printed there in red. It's worth saying as well, for this presentation, I won't be looking at any extracts for this presentation. I will do that in subsequent videos that I do. This is purely an introduction to narrative structure, so this video is equipping you with the tools, I suppose, but then I will look at extracts in other videos that you can apply this to for practice. As I said at the beginning, we always know that the bullet points underneath the question will be the same as well. And they are there at the bottom of that screen. So the first bullet point will say what the writer focuses your attention on in the beginning. And the second bullet point will say how and why the writer changes the focus as the source develops. So you can see even the exam board are using the word focuses and focus a lot and develops. So they're hinting at this idea of a sequence, remember. And then the third bullet point is just a generic, general point, which is anything else. So the next slide, I'm going to be talking about what these bullet points actually mean and what that could mean in terms of the structure of your response as well. It's worth saying that this is a 10-minute question again. It's an analysis question, 8 marks, 10 minutes. And therefore, even though this is its own separate topic, there's only so much you can do in the time. So as I say with the language questions, this is a snapshot question or a snapshot response. You can't write an essay. You don't have the time. So going into those bullet points, particularly the first two, the one about the beginning. So what I say to students is, this first bullet point is your first paragraph of your response. So you're aiming to write 2 paragraphs in 10 minutes. Your first paragraph should always be about the opening sentence and or the opening paragraph. So the first sentence or the first paragraph of the extract, because these extracts have been very carefully thought through by the exam board. They've deliberately chosen an extract which starts in a particular way. So it wouldn't make sense, for example, for the exam board to give you this bullet point about the beginning and then nothing happened in the beginning. So clearly they have thought about, okay, we need to pick an extract where something happens in the beginning that they can talk about. So the first paragraph of your response should always really be about the opening sentence or the opening paragraph. What is it that we're told first? The second bullet point there about the changing the focus. What I say to students is, this is your second paragraph, and you should be talking about something in the middle of the extract and or something at the end. And by talking about the middle and the end, obviously come after the beginning. It means that by talking about the middle and end, you are therefore helping yourself in terms of focus shifting, because you're talking about the text in a chronological way as it's read. So we know, for example, as I said, the word develops means as you read on chronologically. So your first paragraph is about the beginning. The second paragraph is about something in the middle or the end. The third bullet point there I've scribbled out because I don't actually think it's very helpful. It can sometimes lead students astray. They can go off on tangents. They can lose focus. And what it can also encourage students to do is throw in lots of devices without really explaining anything. So it also makes it very hard work because you've got to then think of, what other structure features are there? So I say to students, scribble out that third bullet point, like I do with the third bullet point of language, because it can be unhelpful. Again, 10 minutes, you can't be, there can't be overrun with ideas, because you will just panic and try and say everything in one go and it'll be rushed. So I would just use those 2 bullet points at the top. So 1 paragraph about the opening, the second paragraph about something in the middle or the end. So that's what those bullet points mean, and that's what they will always be like as well, based on historic papers that we've had since 2016. So if we pause here a second before I give you some of the concepts of structure. What we know so far then is structure is all about something that is constructed, something that's built, something that's put together in a deliberate way. So the Eiffel Tower, for example, has been made deliberately. The materials to make the Eiffel Tower have been put together deliberately, and that forms the structure of the Eiffel Tower. Same way with paragraphs in an extract. They have been put together in a deliberate order by the writer. We've got to work out why that order has been chosen and what effect it has on us as readers. Quote from the extract as normal. As I said, this is the only question that will require you to quote, to read the whole extract. So you need to know the flow of the extract. So you need to be able to read the whole thing for this question. 8 marks, 10 minutes. The question and the bullet points will always be the same, as we've just been discussing. Aim to write 2 paragraphs in 10 minutes. The first about the opening, the second about something that happens later in the extract. And by doing the beginning and something later in the extract, you are picking up on that flow of the sequence of the narrative. In bold and capitals there, really important. This is an analysis question. Therefore, it's all about the why again. Why has the writer told you this here? Why does the writer then go on to show you this? What effect does this have on you? Think about somebody holding a torch. You put a torch on and you shine the light onto specific things. So that's spotlighting almost. So why has the writer spotlighted these particular aspects of the text in this order for you? What are they hoping to make you feel or think? Okay, so that's what we know so far. So the final slide is probably the most important one of this whole video, because I've given you here 14 things that you can use to look out for when you have that extract, whether it's for a mock exam or whether it's for the actual real exam at the end of the course. So the writer focuses on whatever to convey whatever. So again, we've got this idea of focusing, showing you something. The writer shifts focus to in order to. So why has the writer gone from describing or portraying this to you to then describing this to you? Why has that transition happened? Sometimes a writer might describe something in a lot of detail. They will really kind of use a large paragraph, maybe of 6 lines, let's say, really describing quite methodically something. And when a writer describes something in a lot of detail in a very methodical way, they are zooming in on it. So if you think of a camera, a close-up shot or a zoom into something, the reason why the camera will do that is because that thing it's zooming onto is important to the plot. So they want us to see it. It will fill the screen. Same thing with a writer. A writer doesn't have a camera, but they do have a pen. And they can describe something in a lot of detail. So if we think about the murder mystery idea again, if you are going to zoom into a knife with blood on it, that would suggest that that knife is important to the plot. Maybe it's the murder weapon. So a writer will often zoom in onto things that are important. Again, we've got to think about why. Sometimes a writer will start outside and move inside. So they might start off by describing a landscape outside a window, for example, and then they will move into describing something inside, perhaps a building, where there's people, our characters. So we can call that an external to internal shift. It can also work the other way. We go from inside to outside. So the shift between internal and external things can also be something that you can comment on for this. There might be a panoramic focus at one point. So a writer might describe a very broad landscape in order to contextualize and place this story within a setting that's important. So almost like a wide-angled lens, we might say, in film or media. Like I said, sequence of events, so beginning, middle, end. Or, slightly more technical, exposition, climax, resolution. So that flow. What is the starting point? What is the central thing that happens, the central event that maybe causes the most tension? But then how does it resolve itself, if indeed it does? Because some texts obviously leave you in a state of suspense. It's also worth thinking about when you write your own stories for question 5, the creative writing question, you are put in charge of deciding your own structure. So if you are planning a story before you write it, which is important, you are going to be thinking about, okay, what's going to happen in the beginning of my story, what's going to happen then, what's going to happen at the end. So this question, as will language, will also help you for your own creative writing for question 5, paper 1. You can talk about sentence and paragraphs lengths of structure as well. So some sentences will be simple or minor, they will be very short. You might then get a long, complex sentence which has many clauses in it with lots of different commas, giving you lots of information about something. You might have a paragraph that's just one line. There are texts out there that I have taught where the paragraph is very, very short because that particular line is so crucial to the interpretation of the text. This is why I say as well, cross off that sentence forms bullet point for the language question, because you can talk about it here. You can also talk about the transition between description and dialogue. So, an extract might begin with characters talking, and the extract might begin in the sense of medias res, which means you start within a conversation that's already started, and then transition to something like description, or it might work the other way around. So how has the writer managed that? And why have they done that? Why have they started with description and then gone into dialogue? Why is that dialogue important, for example? What does it tell us about what's going on? Something else that you can talk about is the overall shape of the piece. We might call that a cyclical structure, which means that the beginning and the end of the extract is about the same thing. So let's say that the first paragraph is about a dog, and then the last paragraph returns to describing that dog. So because we've got the dog at the beginning and the end, we have a cyclical structure. So some extracts also return to where they started. And that could be something you do as well in your own story or your own description. You might also have repeated motifs or symbolism, which are important because they underpin the interpretation of the text or the atmosphere of the text. So if you have a text where it's quite stormy, the weather is quite stormy, the writer might continue to refer to the rain or the wind or the howling gale, for example, and which creates this sense of the inescapable. You can't shelter anywhere from this terrible weather. So by repeating or keep going back to something means the writer foregrounds it, which means the writer brings it right into your face. A slightly more complex term is equilibrium, which means a sense of calm or order that's restored, or not, as the case may be. So it might be a false sense of equilibrium. So if you have, for example, let's say in the middle of an extract, which is the climax, you have, let's say, a robbery in a shop, and the end of the extract, the robber gets caught, the old lady gets her purse back, and everything returns to how it was before. It's happy ever after. Then the sense of order is restored. We have a sense of equilibrium there. Things have gone back to how they should be. So equilibrium is all about, really how it ends. Do we ever get to a point where everything's kind of calm again or all sorted? And then shift, focus, zoom, SFZ. So shifting between things, what the writer focuses on, like spotlighting or with a torch or with a camera, and then zooming into things. What does the writer, zoom in onto because that thing might be particularly important? So there you have it. You've got 14 tools really to have in your collection of things that you can look out for or things that you can talk about for whatever extract you get. It will be very, very unlikely that you'll be able to talk about all of these, all 14. So it might be that your extract only covers 4 or 5 of them, perhaps, if that. But there will always be a sequence to the narrative. Whatever the extract, there will always be a sequence or an order to it. In summary, then, we've got to work out what that sequence is, almost summarise it in a way, without retelling the plot too much, but then, importantly, analysing why that structure or that order has been chosen. So in summary, think of structure as a construction. Think of something that's built just like DNA or a jigsaw or architecture. This text is doing the same. It's those paragraphs and sentences all working together to create the text as you read on the page. Okay, so stay tuned for some further videos where I'll be using specific extracts to practice this stuff with. Thank you.